Welcome back, brothers and sisters, for the second session of the 2022 Pursue Peace Convention of Jehovah's Witnesses. This session corresponds to the Friday afternoon section on your program, and it will continue to develop the scriptural theme from Psalm 29:11, Jehovah will bless his people with peace. Let's begin with a music video presentation. As Jehovah's people, we love to tell others about our God and our hope. The following video features brothers and sisters sharing the good news of peace around the globe. We'll also see the work done at various Bethel facilities in support of this worldwide preaching work. Enjoy.
же, если смерть сразит, из Шеола путь открыт? Тело губящих не бойтесь, ведь души им не убить. Верность царству сохраняйте, чтобы в новом мире жить. Их не бойтесь, о народ мой, я смогу вас защитить. Буду как зеницу ока, преданных своих хранить, преданных своих хранить.
Jehovah's promises of peace bring us great delight. When we think about what life will be like in God's new world, it fills our hearts with appreciation and love for Jehovah. Let's express those feelings as we sing song number 144, entitled Keep Your Eyes on the Prize. That's song number 144. The Bible book of Isaiah contains many promises for the future. Do you take time to contemplate what that future will be like? The following 5-part symposium will help us to picture that wonderful time yet ahead. We will also learn how Jehovah is fulfilling his promise to care for his servants even now. Brother Samuel Hurd, a member of the governing body, will present the first talk entitled, Take Delight in God's Promises of Peace. My servants will eat, my servants will drink.
In His Word, Jehovah has promised to bring peace to His loyal servants. As we have learned, that peace is more than the absence of conflict. It involves our overall well-being, including our health and security. God's heart-warming promises fill us with appreciation and hope. In the Bible book of the 145th Psalm, it tells us in verses 15 and 16, All eyes look hopefully to you. You give them their food in a season. You open your hand and satisfy the desire of every living thing. In this symposium, we will consider the past, present, and future fulfillment of several Bible prophecies of peace that are found in the book of Isaiah. Jehovah promises to provide an abundance of both literal food and spiritual food. When the Israelites loyally served Jehovah, they experienced the blessings foretold in Isaiah 49:10. Today, Jehovah's servants are experiencing the fulfillment of Isaiah 65, verses 13 and 14. There you'll find it to say, Therefore this is what the sovereign Lord Jehovah says. Look, my servants will eat, but you will go hungry. Look, my servants will drink, but you will go thirsty. Look, my servants will rejoice, but you will suffer shame. Look, my servants will shout joyfully because of the good condition of the heart, but you will cry out because of the pain of heart, and you will wail because of a broken spirit. Although we may at times experience literal hunger, we enjoy an abundance of satisfying spiritual food. In the future, Jehovah will completely eliminate literal hunger. As you watch the following video, think about the blessings we enjoy now and the ones we will enjoy in the future.
Through Isaiah, Jehovah promised to feed his servants physically and spiritually. Today, Jehovah invites us to a banquet that is spiritually nourishing. Bible-based videos and publications draw us close to God. And satisfy our hunger for truth. In the new world, abundant, healthy food will be more than a promise. It will be a reality. There will be an abundance of grain on the earth, On the top of the mountains, it will overflow.
What a blessing it is to be among Jehovah's people. Spiritual provisions flow to us like an ever-broadening and ever-deepening river. There's not a grain of salt missing, not a slice of bread or a pat of butter. There is way too much to eat at one meal. We have to come to Jehovah's table several times a week to keep our spiritual fiber intact and energy strong for the work we engage in, the kingdom preaching. We have an abundance of nourishing food, Bible-based publications, recordings and videos, meetings and conventions, website material. Jehovah has not deviated from his promise. Note this one, Psalm 72:16. There will be an abundance of grain on the earth. On the top of the mountains, it will overflow. His fruit will flourish as in Lebanon, and in the cities people will blossom like the vegetation of the earth. And then again, Isaiah 30, verse 23. And he will give the rain for the seed you sow in the ground, and the bread that the ground produces will be abundant and rich. In that day your livestock will graze in spacious pastures. Jehovah has placed everything we need on the table. We must willfully come to the table and sit down and eat. He doesn't make us come, like some mothers may have to demand a reluctant child to come to the house from playing and eat a meal. Be sure to thank Jehovah for the spiritual food he provides. Psalm 100, verses 2 and 3 remind us, serve Jehovah with rejoicing. Come into his presence with joyful shouting. Know that Jehovah is God. He is the one who made us, and we belong to him. We are his people and the sheep of his pasture. Show your appreciation. How? By studying diligently and applying what you learn. If you lack sufficient material things now, take delight in meditating on future kingdom blessings. Jehovah will surely fulfill his promises just as he has always done. Isaiah 55:10 and 11 remind us, for just as the rain and the snow pour down from heaven and do not return there until they saturate the earth, making it produce and sprout, giving seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so my word that goes out of my mouth will be. It will not return to me without results, but it will certainly accomplish whatever is my delight, and it will have sure success in what I send it to do. Brother Ronald Curzon, a helper to the teaching committee, will now present the next talk of this symposium. Take delight in God's promises of peace. They will build houses and plant vineyards.
If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. This familiar saying might be true with human promises, but is certainly not true with promises from Jehovah. They always come true. Just before his death, at the age of 110, Joshua reminded the Israelites why Jehovah's promises can always be trusted. He said, "Not one word out of all the good promises that Jehovah your God has spoken to you has failed. They have all come true for you. Among all of Jehovah's good promises are the heartwarming restoration promises given to the Jews returning from exile in Babylon. Since the land of Judah had lain desolate for 70 years, the Jews wouldn't have expected brand new homes waiting for them to occupy or fields ready for them to harvest. There would be much work for them to do once they arrived. There were many unknowns about their future, which could have caused some to worry or be anxious. Some family heads might have wondered, where will we live? How will I feed my family and keep them safe? Jehovah calmed their hearts with the reassuring promises recorded at Isaiah 65, 21 and 22. Let's read these together. That's Isaiah 65, verses 21 and 22. And there it reads, "They will build houses and live in them, and they will plant vineyards and eat their fruitage. They will not build for someone else to inhabit, nor will they plant for others to eat. For the days of my people will be like the days of a tree, and the work of their hands my chosen ones will enjoy to the full." These promises must have strengthened the Jews. Now, Jehovah didn't say that they might build and live in their own homes and they might enjoy the fruitage from their own vineyards. No, he told his precious chosen ones that they will enjoy these promises to the full. Even though they hadn't been told every detail, and there were many unknowns regarding their future, they knew their God Jehovah. They knew that his promises were for their good and that they would all come true. And those promises did come true. Knowing that God fulfilled all of his promises in the past strengthens our trust and confidence that all of his promises for the future, like the ones that we read in Isaiah 65, will all come true for our everlasting good. What a joy it will be to build and then live in our own home, never having to worry that we will lose it because of a natural disaster or economic collapse. Sadly, though, many of our brothers and sisters today do suffer the harsh realities of living in this old system of things. For example, a sister in Poland named Gabriela experienced great loss when her home was nearly destroyed by a flood. How did she maintain her joy? Notice what she said. "I don't want to talk about what I lost. Those are just material things. Rather, I want to tell you how much I gained. This experience reassured me that being a part of the Christian congregation is a unique privilege as well as a source of joy and happiness." So, although she went through some very difficult times, what did she gain? Joy and happiness. Now, what about a single sister from Puerto Rico named Anel? She endured a very difficult test back in 2017 when Hurricane Maria destroyed her home. As a result of that storm, she lost her job. But notice what she recalled. "During those difficult days, I felt anxious, but I learned to trust in Jehovah through prayer and not let anxiety paralyze me." She also said, "Following the direction of the organization helped me to remain calm. I saw Jehovah's hand in the spiritual encouragement I received, as well as the material assistance provided by the Brotherhood. Jehovah gave me much more than I could even ask for, and my faith was greatly strengthened." So she received assistance from Jehovah, from his organization, and she was greatly strengthened. What about you? Are you suffering some sort of storm in your life, perhaps from a natural disaster, or maybe a figurative one caused by a health issue, a family problem, or some injustice? During such times, it's normal to experience feelings of anxiety, worry about our future, the safety of our family, but don't allow such feelings to paralyze you. Like Gabriela and Anel, keep doing what you can and continue trusting in Jehovah. Also, continue to trust in our loving brotherhood. Our brothers and sisters are true friends who are ready to show love in our time of distress. They will quickly come to our aid by providing practical assistance and relief provisions. They will help us rebuild our home, rebuild our life. They will build us up, stabilize us with words of encouragement. When we put our complete trust in Jehovah and His promises, we receive the best protection possible. Note what the psalmist wrote at Psalm 91, verses 1 and 2. Psalm 91, 1 and 2. Says, "Anyone dwelling in the secret place of the Most High will lodge under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say to Jehovah, You are my refuge and my stronghold, my God, in whom I trust." What a beautiful reminder of protection from Jehovah. But what is the secret place of the Most High? Well, it's a figurative place of spiritual security and protection. Those who dwell or lodge with God as His personal guests and remain there are safe from anything or anyone that threatens their faith and their love for God. We can be sure that Jehovah will never abandon those who trust in Him. Not now, not ever. As you watch the following video, envision the secure future that lies ahead when we will enjoy complete security.
Do you long for a home of your own? Jehovah promised the returning exiles that they would build and enjoy comfortable dwellings. Jehovah likewise cares for us, whether we lose our home or we are taken from it. Above all, true worship provides spiritual security that is found nowhere else. The spiritual home we have now reminds us that Jehovah will give us a physical place to call home in the new world. They will build houses and live in them.
What a beautiful video. It helps us imagine what we will experience in the near future when all of God's promises become a reality on a paradise earth. When we truly are safe, cared for in every way, physically, spiritually, and emotionally. Would you like to read another comforting promise from Jehovah? It's found in Isaiah chapter 65 and verse 23. And there it says, "They will not toil for nothing, nor will they bear children for distress, because they are the offspring made up of those blessed by Jehovah, and their descendants with them." This must have brought great comfort to the Jews, and how comforting it is for us today. In the new world, all families will experience Jehovah's blessing and enjoy the results of their hard work. In the meantime, if you have lost your home or possessions, or if you experience loss in the future, keep focusing on Jehovah's good promises. Strong faith can help you to weather any storm, literal or figurative. Trust that Jehovah will hear and respond to your needs, even anticipating them. He promises to open His hand and satisfy the proper desire of every living thing. That promise includes you and your family. Continue to take delight in all of God's promises, knowing that not one word out of all the good promises that Jehovah your God has spoken to you has failed. They will all come true for you. Brother Leonard Myers, a helper to the writing committee, will now present the next talk of this symposium. Take delight in God's promises of peace. The wolf and the lamb will feed together.
As we continue our consideration of the promises of peace in Isaiah's prophecies, I'd like you to imagine an Israelite living in Babylon. Now, he's just learned that Jews can return to Jerusalem and help to rebuild the temple. So he must decide if he and his family will leave Babylon to make the long trip to his homeland. What might he consider? Well, after 70 years, the land must have changed. Fields would be overgrown with weeds. Wolves, leopards, lions, and bears must freely walk in the fields. Snakes make their home there. So he might ask himself, will my domestic animals be killed by predators? Will my small children be bitten by snakes? And what about the danger of fierce men attacking us on the journey home? Well, any such fears could be dispelled by considering the prophecy at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 through 9. Let's read that together. Isaiah chapter 11, and notice this promise of peace, starting in verse 6. The wolf will reside for a while with the lamb, and with the young goat the leopard will lie down, and the calf and the lion and the fattened animal will all be together, and a little boy will lead them. The cow and the bear will feed together, and their young will lie down together. The lion will eat straw like the bull. The nursing child will play over the lair of a cobra, and a weaned child will put his hand over the den of a poisonous snake. They will not cause any harm or any ruin in all my holy mountain, because the earth will certainly be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah as the waters cover the sea. What a beautiful promise of peace! Jews wouldn't need to fear wild animals or fierce men on their journey home or in their restored land. With these poetic words, Jehovah assured the exiles that they and their livestock would be safe. He would bless them with peace. And did you notice, according to verse 7, the lion would symbolically eat straw, illustrating that lions wouldn't kill the Jews' cattle. Faithful ones would have nothing to fear from animal or human predators. Do we see this prophecy being fulfilled in our day? Not with the literal animals, but we do see a spiritual fulfillment. Notice again the end of verse 9. It says, the earth will certainly be filled with the knowledge of Jehovah. Now, does the knowledge of Jehovah change the behavior of animals? No. But the knowledge of God does change people. In our day, the knowledge of Jehovah helps people who are violent to transform their personality and become peaceable. In harmony with Colossians chapter 3, verse 10, these ones have clothed themselves with a new personality. They've stripped off animalistic, violent tendencies and transformed their lives in harmony with what the Bible teaches. They get along peaceably with others. Perhaps you know someone who made such changes. Or perhaps you made these changes, leaving behind a violent way of life. Let me share with you such an experience. A man named Jose was trained in the martial arts and in the use of weapons. He'd broken the law so many times that he was brought to trial on 22 counts and sentenced to 20 years in prison. He was so violent that even fellow inmates were afraid of him, and he was kept in a high-security cell. For 7 years, his fleshly sister, who was one of Jehovah's Witnesses, visited him, but he always rejected the Bible's message. In time, though, he accepted one of our publications, and a Bible study was started. Right away, he made tremendous changes in his conduct. 1 week later, he gave a personal witness to 200 prisoners, and the following week to 600 more. He even received permission to visit the inmates in other prison blocks. Well, due to the remarkable change in his behavior, his sentence was reduced to 15 years. However, after serving just 10 years, he was released from prison. Jose was eventually baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Truly a case of the wolf residing with the lamb. And what about the future fulfillment of Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 through 9? In the earthly paradise that God has promised, there will be delightful peace among humans and between humans and animals. Don't you long for that time? As you watch the following video, notice the peace we enjoy with fellow believers now, and just imagine the peace that we'll enjoy in paradise.
How would you feel during a long journey where you might meet wild animals and criminals along the road? Jehovah assured the returning exiles that they would return in safety and dwell in peace. In the spiritual paradise we enjoy right now, people who were once violent have learned to be humble, loving, and peaceable. Imagine the peace that will reign in God's new world. Where we can wander this beautiful globe, explore every corner, and admire the handiwork of the true God. With no fear. They will do no harm nor cause any ruin in all my holy mountain, says Jehovah.
As the video showed, people who were once violent have learned to be humble, loving, and peaceable. And how did you feel when you saw scenes in the video of humans so close to wild animals? Jehovah's promise of peace among humans and peace between humans and animals is thrilling. Please notice what Isaiah further wrote about this peace at Isaiah chapter 65. Please turn there with me, Isaiah 65. Now these are words similar to those we read earlier at Isaiah chapter 11. Isaiah 65, verse 25. The wolf and the lamb will feed together. The lion will eat straw just like the bull, and the serpent's food will be dust. They will do no harm, nor cause any ruin in all my holy mountain, says Jehovah. Skilled artists in the art department at World Headquarters beautifully illustrate such scenes, and the images can be found in our publications. But what Isaiah describes is no artist's rendition. This will be real. Think how you'll feel when you're not afraid of wild animals, and the animals aren't afraid of you. As we look forward to that future promise of peace, what can we do now to pursue peace? One thing is to contribute to the peace of our spiritual paradise, the secure, spiritually prosperous environment in which we worship Jehovah. Jesus stated at Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, "Happy are the peacemakers." A peacemaker is skilled at restoring peace among brothers when peace is disturbed. But more importantly, a peacemaker strives to avoid disturbing peace in the first place. Does peacemaker describe you? Are you contributing to our spiritual paradise in that way? Something else we can do as we await the future fulfillment of the wolf and the lamb feeding together is to meditate on what it will be like to help resurrected ones who were violent to become peaceable. Imagine studying with a resurrected one who had a violent background, perhaps experiencing a violent death because of a fierce personality. How will you reason with the person from God's Word to help him see the need to be a peacemaker? What examples of such transformations will you share? And how will you explain the prophecies of peace at Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 through 9, and chapter 65, verse 25? We encourage all of you to think deeply about how this promise of peace was fulfilled for the ancient Jews, how the promise is being fulfilled today, and what life on earth will be like when it's fulfilled in the future. May all of us take delight in the peaceful promise of the wolf and the lamb feeding together. Brother James Mance, a helper to the writing committee, will now present the next talk of this symposium. Take delight in God's promises of peace. No resident will say, "I am sick."
Jehovah is the great healer. Only He can make the promise. No resident will say, "I am sick." Why can we be confident that Jehovah is going to keep His promise to bring an end to all sickness? We find assurance in the words of Isaiah chapter 35, verses 5 and 6. Please open your Bibles to that scripture. Here we read a promise of healing that Jehovah made to the nation of Israel. This promise gives us hope because it was actually fulfilled on a small scale more than 2,500 years ago. Isaiah chapter 35, verses 5 and 6 reads, "At that time, the eyes of the blind will be opened, and the ears of the deaf will be unstopped. At that time, the lame will leap like the deer, and the tongue of the speechless will shout for joy. For waters will burst forth in the wilderness, and streams in the desert plain." Isaiah recorded this promise 125 years before the Babylonian army destroyed Jerusalem. It was fulfilled after Jehovah freed the Israelites from Babylonian captivity in 537 BCE and restored them to their homeland in Israel. But you may ask, were the blind, deaf, lame, and speechless really healed at that time? To answer, we need to apply a basic principle. Jehovah restores what was lost. During the 70 years of exile, Jehovah did not punish the Israelites by striking them with physical blindness, deafness, lameness, and loss of speech. Therefore, their restoration would not require the healing of their physical disabilities. However, these afflictions are a good description of the self-inflicted spiritual sickness that had caused the nation to fall into apostasy and lose Jehovah's favor. Jehovah saw their repentant attitude and their desire to restore true worship in Jerusalem. He healed their spiritual sickness by forgiving their sins and restoring them to His favor. In other words, they came to their spiritual senses. They regained their spiritual vision and their ability to hear, obey, and speak Jehovah's word. No longer spiritually lame, they were energized to carry on Jehovah's pure worship. Similarly today, we are eyewitnesses. Yes, we are the beneficiaries of a worldwide spiritual healing program. Jehovah heals us spiritually by freeing us from false religious teachings and unclean practices. He has brought us into a spiritual paradise where our spiritual strength is renewed day by day. In a spiritual sense, the blind are learning to see, and the deaf are learning to hear. But is spiritual healing the only part of the fulfillment of Jehovah's promise? No. Please open your Bibles to Isaiah chapter 33 and verse 24. As we read this verse, pay attention to the latter part because it contains the key to understanding why physical healing is included in God's promise, "No resident will say, 'I am sick.'" Isaiah chapter 33, verse 24 says, "And no resident will say, 'I am sick.' The people dwelling in the land will be pardoned for their error." Did you notice that the end of sickness is related to our being pardoned for our errors or sins? Clearly, that ties the fulfillment to a spiritual healing. However, our imperfect, sinful condition is also the reason that we get physically sick. Therefore, in the new world, on the basis of the healing power of Jesus' ransom sacrifice, we will experience a healing of our physical sicknesses. Jehovah's promise that no resident will say, "I am sick," will come true in the complete sense. As you watch the following video, think about the spiritual blessings we enjoy now and imagine what our lives will be like in the future when all our physical ailments will be healed.
Clear instruction from Jehovah draws us close to Him and maintains spiritual health. While false teachings hold many in the grip of spiritual darkness, Jehovah offers true freedom. The spiritual health we enjoy now reminds us that perfect physical and mental health await us in paradise. Imagine waking every day, feeling clean, healthy, happy, and full of the joy of life. Jehovah promises, no resident will say, "I am sick."
How refreshing and heartwarming to think of the global healing that lies ahead. We are confident that this is going to happen. Why? Because we have already experienced how Jehovah has healed us spiritually. Keep in mind the powerful statement from the video. The spiritual health we enjoy now reminds us that perfect physical and mental health await us in paradise. We also learned from the video that clear instruction from Jehovah draws us close to Him and helps us to maintain our spiritual health today. What a blessing it is to be taught by Jehovah. We can show our appreciation for this spiritual healing by thanking Jehovah in prayer. Psalm 40, verse 5, mentions another way we can thank the great healer for all He has done and will do for us. Let's read it. Psalm 40 and verse 5 says, How many things you have done, O Jehovah my God! Your wonderful works and your thoughts toward us. None can compare to you. If I were to try to tell and speak of them, they would be too numerous to recount. Our gratitude to Jehovah will move us to tell others about Jehovah's wonderful works, to speak of the many things he has done. And we will never run out of good things to say about our God. Those who respond favorably will come to know Jehovah as their great healer and enjoy his friendship forever. Granted, today many of us are dealing with serious health challenges, but we do what we can to share with others this good news about healing. And we take delight in Jehovah's promises, which cannot fail. When Jesus was on earth, no sickness was beyond his ability to heal, whether it was physical, mental, or emotional. In the new world, such healings will take place on a much grander scale, and the cures will be permanent. Many of the great crowd will go through the Great Tribulation with serious, debilitating illnesses. Our publications have said that it seems reasonable to expect that shortly after the destruction of Satan's system of things, miracles like those that Jesus performed while on earth will no doubt take place on a global scale. That will allow all survivors of the Great Tribulation to have a satisfying share in transforming this earth into a beautiful paradise. And by the end of Jesus' 1,000-year reign, they will reach the very fullness of perfect human life. As we enjoy the rich blessings of our spiritual paradise now, let's keep in mind that these spiritual blessings are evidence that all the promises of the great healer will come true. We will forever take delight in the complete fulfillment of Jehovah's promise that no resident will say, "I am sick." Brother Garrett Lush, a member of the governing body, will now present the final talk of this symposium. Take delight in God's promises of peace. He will swallow up death forever.
How wonderful and impressive to realize that Jehovah promises to raise people from the dead and to end death permanently. I invite you to read with me that comforting promise found at Isaiah chapter 25. Regarding our God Jehovah, Isaiah 25, 7 and 8 says, "He will do away with the shroud that is enveloping all the peoples and the covering that is woven over all the nations. He will swallow up death forever, and the sovereign Lord Jehovah will wipe away the tears from all faces." The Watchtower of September 15, 2014, page 25, said, "Fittingly, the Bible refers to inherited sin and death as the shroud that is enveloping all the peoples and the covering that is woven over all the nations." This suffocating covering or shroud, this intricate web work of condemnation entraps all people. But how do we know that Jehovah can resurrect the dead? Because he already brought his people back to life figuratively in the past. In 537, before our Common Era, Jehovah in effect raised the nation of Israel from the dead, restoring the people who were held captive in Babylon for 70 years to their homeland and re-establishing pure worship. In 1919, Jehovah freed his modern-day people from Babylon the Great, the world empire of false religion, revitalizing them for renewed activity. Isaiah 26:19 prophesied this: "Your dead will live, my corpses will rise up. Awake and shout joyfully, you residents in the dust, for your dew is as the dew of the morning, and the earth will let those powerless in death come to life." When were God's people held captive by Babylon the Great? That spiritual captivity lasted from the 2nd century of our Common Era to 1919, when anointed Christians were gathered into the restored congregation. God's people were tested and refined during the years following the establishment of God's kingdom in the heavens in 1914. Then, in 1919, Jesus appointed the faithful and discreet slave over God's cleansed people to give them spiritual food at the proper time. This was the year that God's people started to return to their God-given spiritual estate. It was also the time when they were released from symbolic captivity to Babylon the Great. How happy we can be, though, that after God's people experienced centuries of spiritual oppression, we are living in the time when those having insight will shine brightly and many will cleanse themselves as they will be refined. We, as God's people, not only experience the spiritual restoration and the spiritual paradise, but will see the fulfillment of Isaiah 25, verse 8, when God swallows up death forever. Yes, Jehovah will end death forever. What a thrilling promise of peace. Who of us has not lost a loved one to some disease, perhaps even from COVID-19, or an accident or a disaster? God here promises that death will be no more, which suggests that the children who might be born then will not have to face the prospect of growing up and then getting old, ending in death. In addition to Isaiah's prophecy, Revelation 21:4 clearly states a similar thought. There we read that death will be no more. As you watch the following video, think about what Jehovah has already done to show His love for us and what He will do for us in the future.
Jehovah fulfilled his word to the exiles. He restored that ruined nation, as if bringing it back to life. In 1919, Jehovah did something similar. He released his modern-day people from spiritual captivity and energized them to preach. Just as Jehovah raised his people from figurative death, so will he reverse the effects of literal death. Indeed, God will swallow up death forever. Imagine living longer than any tree. Because death will be no more.
How we delight in the many things Jehovah gives us. Today, we are privileged to be among the only group of people who worship Jehovah in the elevated way that he approves as prophesied in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. And think about the overwhelming joy we will feel when Jehovah resurrects our loved ones. Thank Jehovah for our precious resurrection hope. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13 says, "Moreover, brothers, we do not want you to be ignorant about those who are sleeping in death, so that you may not sorrow as the rest do who have no hope." Meditate on it to strengthen your faith and courage. Why is it important for us to do so? Because the threat of death is a powerful weapon. Those under Satan's control use it to force people to betray their friends or to give up their convictions. But that threat is powerless against us. We know that if our enemies kill us, Jehovah will restore us to life. We are convinced that nothing they can do can sever our attachment to Jehovah. What remarkable wisdom Jehovah has shown by giving us the resurrection hope. By means of it, he disarms Satan of one of his most effective weapons and at the same time arms us with unbreakable courage. Remember that death is temporary and that the life Jehovah offers each of us will last forever. In this symposium, we have learned how Jehovah fulfilled his promises in the past, how he is fulfilling them today, and how he will fulfill them in the future. As we have seen, God's promises of peace include 1. Nutritious spiritual and physical food for all. 2. Adequate housing and satisfying work. 3. Freedom from the risk of violence. 4. Perfect physical health. And 5. The elimination of death. With Jehovah as our God and best friend, we will delight in the abundance of peace forever.
Thank you, brothers. Few things bring more joy to our heart than meditating on what Jehovah is doing for us now and what he will do in the near future. We have so many rich blessings to look forward to. How fitting it is that we keep our focus on pleasing our loving Heavenly Father. Thus, we invite you to sing song number 35 entitled, "Make Sure the More Important Things," song number 35.